What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to OneClass. My name is Kevin. Today I'm going to be leading you through some economics questions, a little bit of a background about me. I hold both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in economics, and I also work day-to-day as an economist. So what I'm going to be doing is reviewing just like 7 questions over the next 40 minutes or so, maybe a little shorter, maybe a little longer. I'm just going to walk us through the answers that our junior tutor came to, add anything else that I think may be beneficial, and make any corrections if necessary. Let's get this started here. Looks like it's working okay. So our first question reads as follows. Explain the major differences between for-profit and non-profit organizations. When might a nonprofit act like a for-profit, and when might they become less efficient? So what our junior tutor said is that the aim of the for-profit organizations is to maximize their profits and share these profits with their owners and other shareholders. And I think that's actually very important, so I'm going to write that over here. And denote profit with the symbol pi. So for-profit, their objective is to max profits. Most of the economics work you're going to do is with profit maximizing firms. And a lot of their objectives are going to be max profits, subject to, usually denoted ST, some constraint. These constraints are typically capital, denoted with a K, and labor, denoted with an L, although depending on the problem, there may be different inputs that act as constraints. Whereas not for profits, come on. Not-for-profits try to maximize their benefit to society. Although due to somewhat ineffective regulation sometimes, this isn't always the case. There have been many documented instances, of not-for-profits being taken advantage of, either not spending the money on whatever good they claim to be helping, or existing mainly for tax purposes, etc. But so junior tutor said, the aim of the for-profit organization is to maximize their profits and share these profits with their owners and other shareholders, whereas not-for-profit organizations aim to address the needs of the society. Some of the ways in which they contribute to society are mentioned below. First, contribution to society. They work significantly towards promoting the rights of low-income, independently employed female workers, etc. Some other things is, I'll carry on. 2 is contribution in development. They work towards improving the education quality. They also act as a think tank on environmental issues in the USA, such as urban planning, climate change, sustainable development, etc. Third, contribution professions. Many private technical colleges, institutes, and private universities are registered as non-profit organizations. They've made a significant contribution to the creation of professional labor for the country. And that's perfectly accurate to me. Now, sometimes these not-for-profit organizations are acting as a mode for profit in cases of 1, tax concessions, which I sort of mentioned a little earlier. Many people invest in these organizations for tax avoidance. So a lot of times charitable giving will result in a large tax refund. And sometimes when people are in very high income brackets, or maybe I should say tax brackets, it's beneficial to contribute for that reason. Second, unaccountable funds. these not-for-profit organizations are used to convert black money to white money, and due to their easy norms, several funds remain unaccountable. So in this case, black money means illegal money, white money means legal money, so I believe what they're referring to is money laundering. 3, the misuse of funds, absence of legal framework to monitor the activities of these not-for-profit organizations in the manner in which the money is spent. Allegations for money laundering and financing of illegal activities have been raised. I think there was I'm trying to remember who, some artist recently started up a non-for-profit and was found to have spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars on like private flights to the islands and things of that nature. It's not coming to me. I can't remember who off the top of my head. 4th, are development hurdles. Sometimes, for example, these organizations create obstacles to the development of a country. If a nuclear project is sanctioned in Cuba with the help of Russia, several American not-for-profit organizations protest against the plant with local people. So organizations like that can have political intentions. Now, when their aim for societal development changes to political motives, these kinds of nonprofit organizations act as a reverse economy. They become highly corrupt, and any legal action against them without many proofs will again create problems for the ruling government. I don't want to expand on that too much because I am not an expert on not-for-profits, but I think that'd be something very interesting to look into. So if you are more interested in learning about not-for-profits, I would look at that. Overall, I thought this was an excellent write-up by our junior tutor, and really encompassed the gist or the basics of not-for-profit organizations. Now we can move on to question 2. And question 2 reads, explain and discuss the terms utility and utilitarianism. And our junior tutor has written that utility refers to the satisfaction that the consumer can derive from the consumption of a commodity. If a product has the capability to satisfy a human need, it is said to possess utility for the individual. However, this is not the same as the usefulness of the product. Utilitarianism is the theory that states that economic actions should achieve the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. The economists who propagated this theory were Bentham, J.S. Mill, and others. The classical utilitarians, Jeremy Bentham, and John Stuart Mill identified the good with the pleasure it gives. And maximization of utility for the society as a whole is the aim of utilitarianism. All that to say is that utility is roughly equal to happiness or satisfaction. And utility is ordinal, not cardinal. So let me just make sure I'm using that right. Right, so just to elaborate on that really quickly, a cardinal number is a number that says how many of something there are, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're talking like there are 5 apples. But an ordinal number is a number that tells the position of something in a list. So when I say that utility is ordinal and not cardinal, that means that having 8 utils, which is the unit of utility, utils, having 8 utils doesn't really mean anything. But we know that people prefer having 8 utils to 4 utils. So I'm going to write ordinal not cardinal. And what this means is that 2 utils are better than or preferable to 1 util. But 2 utils alone doesn't mean anything. So a good example of this is like you're having a good day and you're like, I'm happy. Nobody's going to ask you, oh, like how many units of happy are you? Because it's immeasurable. You can't quantify it. But you do know that when you're happy, you do know that it's a better day or a better feeling than when you're sad or having a bad day. So more happiness is preferable to less, even though you cannot define how much happiness you have. 2 utils alone doesn't mean anything. I'm trying to think of what else I can maybe add here. Typically, consumption of a good has diminishing returns to utility. Example of this is maybe money is a pretty common one. So if we graph income on the x-axis and utility on the y-axis, money, we'll call it salary. So how much money you're paid in a year. And the utility goes with it. And we'll max out at, say, like $1 million down here. And we'll say somebody makes $0 down here. In effect, that's probably not realistic. You know, there are government programs, employment insurance, things of that nature. So people don't go without any money, but for the sake of this graph, you can just roll with it. Chart here. It's typically going to look like this. Again, this is not going to be perfect, but it's just to paint the idea. When you have a $0 a year salary, and you get a raise to maybe $20,000, that's going to make a huge difference to your happiness because your living conditions are going to increase. You'll probably be able to upgrade your access to necessities such as your housing, etc. So this 20 grand here, this 20 grand increase in salary made a huge change in your utility. Now, if you're making like 980,000, that came out weird, $980,000, so just 20,000 short of $1 million. If you're already making that much money and you get a $20 million, or sorry, $20,000 a year raise, it's really not going to make all that much of a difference in your life. Because, for example, you can already afford all the necessities you could ever need. So while it might make you a little happier, maybe you can, I don't know, buy a new sports car you've always wanted a little sooner. It's really not going to make too much of a difference to your happiness because it doesn't fundamentally change the way you live. Whereas when you're on the lower end of the salary scale, a raise of that amount is going to make a very big difference, a very big change to the way you live. So as you can see, there's only a very small increase in utility on the high end of the salary scale, very large increase in utility on the low end. So this we can call diminishing marginal returns to utility. Oh, sorry. Actually, this is diminishing marginal returns to salary in terms of utility. Cool. Trying to think if there's anything else I might add. I don't think there is. I think remembering that it's ordinal and not cardinal is important. It took me a while to probably properly conceptualize utility. But we can now move on. Question 3. And question 3 reads as follows. A local gym knows the demand for gym memberships for the typical consumer is given by, so our demand given by P equals 32 minus 3Q. Where Q is the number of visits per month. The gym offers 2 membership plans. Plan 1, which is $150 a month and no fee per visit. And plan 2 is going to be $100 a month and $5 per visit. Questions are I hope I'm still streaming right now. It's got a thing about insufficient disk space to continue recording. I'm just going to operate as if you guys can continue to see me. If not, I suppose we'll figure it out later. Yeah, maybe I can check the thing here. All right, I don't see myself, so I assume we're still rolling. Where was I? A local gym knows the demand for gym memberships for the typical consumer is given by P equals 32 minus 3Q, where Q is the number of visits per month. The gym offers 2 membership plans. Plan 1, $150 a month and no fee per visit, or Plan 2, $100 a month and a $5 per visit. A is a $100 monthly fee, a reasonable amount to pay. In other words, is $100 less than the maximum a rational consumer would be willing to pay given the $5 per fee visit. Hint, how many visits would our consumer demand at $5? And B, how many visits per month would make the consumer indifference between the 2 plans, which is more preferred if she is over this number, under this number? C, consider a variation of Plan 2. Our typical consumer knows for certain exactly how often she will use the gym each month and pays a per visit fee according to the demand curve with a monthly membership price equal to the full associated consumer surplus. Should a consumer go with plan 1 or plan 2, she knows she will use this gym 10 times a month. I'm likely not going to do this entire question, but I will get started on it and see what our junior tutor said. So we said we've got an inverse demand function here where P is going to equal 32 minus 3Q. Plan 1 is going to equal $180 a month and $0 per visit fees. Plan 2 is going to equal $100 a month and $5 per visit fees. Question A read, is $100 monthly fee a reasonable amount to pay? As our junior tutor said, if $100 monthly fee is reasonable or not would totally depend on the number of visits the customer wants to make to the gym. If the customer chooses a $100 plan, he will pay less than $150 a month. Otherwise, he can choose a $150 plan for the entire month. So let me make sure I'm looking at this right. So if we were to rearrange this, we 3Q would equal 32 P. So the quantity of 0 here, we would have a demand price of 32, right? Then for each visit to the gym, that will decrease by 3. So for example here, 29, 26, 23, 20, 17, 11, 8, 5, 2, 0. So our demand curve, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to look something like this, P. Oh, that doesn't make sense because if Q is the number of visits, they're not going to demand less as they visit more. They're be willing to pay a lower price when they get 10 visits. Oh, it's per visit. I understand. I apologize for the confusion. So, plan 2 here, if there's a $5 per visit fee, then P is going to equal 5. So we can say P equals 5. As a result, 5 is going to equal 32 minus 3Q. 3Q. It's going to equal 32 minus 5. Q is going to equal 27, and our Q star is going to equal 9. 9 visits. So what our junior tutor has written is that if $100 monthly fee is feasible now, it would depend on the number of visits the customer wants to make to the gym. The customer chooses a $100 plan, he will pay less than $150 a month. Otherwise, he can choose the $150 plan for the entire month. So if he plans on going 9 times or less, this is Q star. So 9 times or less. you would go with plan 2. Because that plan charges you a $100 flat fee plus $5 a visit. So if you go 9 times, $100 plus 9 visits plus the $5 times the $5 flat fee gives you $145, which is less than $150. If he goes 10 times, he or she goes 10 times, they're going to be indifferent between plan 1 and plan 2 because plan 1 would cost $150, the flat rate, and plan 2 would cost $100 plus $5 a visit times 10 visits would also equal $100, $150. And if they go 11 times or more, they're going to go with plan 1, because if they were to go with plan 2, they would pay a $100 flat fee, they would pay $5 a visit, and they visit 11 times. That would cost them $155. It would be cheaper if they did plan 1. So Junior Tutor has said, so for choosing a $100 plan, a customer must not visit the gym more than 9 times. As for 9 times, he'll pay $145, which is less than $150. Otherwise, he's going to choose a $150 plan. Question B read, how many visits per month would make this consumer indifferent between the 2 plans? And which is more preferred if she is over this number or under this number? So that's kind of what I just did right here. We've got it all figured out. If we go 9 times or less to the gym, plan 2 is preferable because you're going to be paying between $100 and $145, depending on how many times you go. If you go exactly 10 times, they'll be indifferent between the 2 plans because it'll cost you $150 either way. And if you go 11 times or more, you're going to go with plan 1, which will cost you $150. Because if you went with the other one, you would pay between $155 to infinity, I suppose. I think I'm just gonna, well, I'm just gonna leave it there because I think doing the same thing over is just a little pointless. So we're gonna say we can move on to question 4 now. Question 4 reads, what is the real interest rate? What is the nominal interest rate? Characterize the equation to express real interest rate in terms of the nominal interest rate. So our Junior Tutor's got it down pat. A nominal interest rate is the interest rate that does not take into account inflation. This is the interest rate that is quoted on the bonds. For example, if you borrow $100 at a 10% interest rate, you pay $10 in interest without taking inflation into account. A real interest rate is the interest rate that takes into account the inflation rate. The real interest rate is adjusted for inflation and gives the real rate of the bond. Here they've got the real interest rate is equal to nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. But if I remember correctly, it is only roughly equal to the real interest rate minus the expected inflation rate. I'm going to Google that to make sure because I don't want to lead you guys astray. Fisher equation. This is ringing a bell. Yeah, so I think the actual proper equation, or proper identity, I should say, we've got next year's expected inflation rate, if I'm incorrect, is the change of price level, but here they approximate it to the nominal interest rate is roughly equal to the real plus the inflation rate. So the distinction I want to make is that it is not going to be exact. This is incorrect, but having it approximate is correct, and is a pretty frequently used equation. So just a way to give us an example is if like you make an investment and your investment returns 7%, but the inflation rate that year, more specifically on the products in that investment, was 2%. The real interest rate would be 5%. It would be the 7% nominal interest rate minus the 2% inflation. Don't think I really have anything else to add to that. I remember doing or going through the Fisher equation rather rigorously, I think towards the end of undergrad. So it's maybe worth reading up on a little more if this kind of thing interests you. But yeah. On to question 5. This is, I think there's 7 questions, so won't be too much longer. Explain the difference between a change in demand, change in quantity demanded. So of course, we're going to have our quantity on the x-axis, our price on the y-axis. Demand slopes down. Try it again. Our demand slopes downwards, and our supply slopes upwards. The point where the two of them meet is called the equilibrium, or the market clearing price, and the market clearing quantity. And that is our equilibrium, the point where quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. Maybe I'll read our junior tutor's answer first, and then come back to my little chart here. So explain the difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. So our junior tutor has written demand. Demand for a commodity refers to the desire to buy a commodity backed with sufficient purchasing power and the willingness to spend. When the demand for a commodity changes due to a change in price, that is known as a change in quantity demanded, leads to movement along the demand curve. Said in the demand curve, it should say movement along the demand curve. When the demand of a commodity changes due to a change in factors other than price, it is known as a change in demand. To a shift of the demand curve, either rightwards or leftwards. So when there's a change in price, say the government imposes a price floor. Let me get rid of this equilibrium bit. So I'll run through 2 scenarios here. One, government imposes a price floor at a price that's above the equilibrium price floor. As a result, this price, if you draw it out, crosses the quantity demanded curve over here, the quantity supplied, and the supply curve, over here, which means that quantity demanded is here, and quantity supplied is here. I just want to make sure my headphones are still working because I just made a weird sound. Looks like they are. Again, I'm hoping I'm still streaming. So when the government institutes a price floor, it causes the quantity demanded to fall and the quantity supplied to increase. And since supply is greater than demand, we're going to have a surplus. But the important thing to note is that this change in price, raising price from P star to PF, caused our quantity demanded to fall from Q star to QD. And what this looked like was a movement. Oh no, put that back. Cool. What this looked like was a movement along the demand curve. You get a similar situation when a price ceiling is instituted at a point that is below the equilibrium, but I'm not going to draw that just for the sake of time. That would look like price ceiling we instituted in here. Quantity demanded is way up there. You get the gist of it. So a change in quantity demanded leads to a movement along the demand curve like we just showed. Now there are a number of factors that cause a change in demand, that would change in quantity demanded. Looks like our tutors listed probably the 5 biggest ones. I'll read through those quick. The price of a commodity, other things remaining the same. With a rise in the price of the commodity, its demand contracts. To fall in the price, its demand extends. The inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and its demand is called the law of demand. It causes a movement along the demand curve, either up or down. That's what I just showed you. Change in the price of related goods. Demand for a commodity is also affected by the change in the price for related goods, like substitute goods or complementary goods. Substitute goods are those which are used in place of each other. So example is like you're really craving some fast food and you wanted to get a burger, but when you went to Burger King, Whoppers now cost $50. So obviously you said, no way, I'll just get some pizza instead. So those are substitutes. They more or less scratch the same itch. So an increase in the price of one good increases the demand of the other good and vice versa. Just to reiterate that, if every burger store near your house went way up in price, you'd probably just start ordering pizza when you had a craving for fast food. On the other hand, complementary goods are those which together satisfy a particular consumer wish. Increase in the price of one good decreases the demand of the other good. It causes a shift of the demand curve, either rightwards or leftwards. So for example, all the burgers at all these burger places, the price goes through the roof. As a result, the demand for burgers is going to go down, but the demand for fries is also probably going to go down because you normally buy them in tandem. So if that were the case, if price for a burger went through the roof, the demand for burgers would shift to the left. Call it a D prime. The demand for burgers would shift to the left. As a result, yeah, demand would fall, and as a result, the quantity demand and quantity supply would fall. The income of the consumer, so an increase in the income of consumer increases the demand of normal good and reduces the demand of inferior goods. Causes shift of the demand curve either rightward or leftwards, increase in income, shifts the demand curve rightwards and vice versa. So if you make more money, you can now afford more of normal goods, which are, most goods are normal, so like things like, I don't know, coffees in the morning. If you're not making much money, you probably don't want to stop and buy Starbucks every morning. If you're making a good income, maybe you don't really care as much and you don't mind spending a little extra money in Starbucks in the morning. Inferior goods are goods whose demand drops when income rises. This is things like hamburger helper and Mr. Noodles and beans, all the things that got me through college. Now that I'm out of college, I don't really eat Mr. Noodles anymore. I don't deserve it anymore. 4, taste and preference of the consumer. If consumers have favorable taste and preference for the good, then demand of that good increases and vice versa. If consumers have favorable taste and preference for the good, then demand curve shifts rightwards, and unfavorable taste for the commodity shifts leftwards. So an example of this would be like Champion clothing. When we were younger, you could get at Walmart for like $10 for a sweater. But then somebody decided it was cool, and now everybody's wearing Champion, and as a result, their prices went way up. So because there was such a demand increase, the demand curve shifted to the right over to D prime. Price went up, and so did the quantity. Trying to think of, oh, I don't know if you guys remember Livestrong, that I think Lance Armstrong brand. And he was like the best biker in the world. Everybody had those like yellow wristbands. And then it came out he was like doping and cheated. And as a result, the demand fell because like, why would you wear his stuff? And it got really cheap to buy whatever you wanted of that. And there wasn't much of it being demanded. So quantity fell down here, price fell down here. Another example that might be like big baller brand, LeVar Ball. I don't think it was ever cool, but it definitely got even less cool over time. And then as a result, like they came out with these like, I don't know, like $250 sneakers. Nobody bought them. Companies went bankrupt. Everybody knew it. Nobody would caught dead in them, and they were selling for like $50 a pop or less, because people just wanted to get rid of them. So taste and preference of the consumers can have a huge role in the demand of something. Lastly is expectation. People expect that the price of a commodity will reduce in the near future. Then people demand less number of goods today. As a result, demand decreases and causes the demand curve to shift leftwards. When people expect commodity prices to rise in the near future, the increase in current consumption will lead to a shift in the demand curve to the right. So I imagine anybody that's thinking about buying headphones or like Fire TV sticks, anything electronic really, is holding off right now until Black Friday next Friday. And that's because your expectation is that you'll be able to get that thing you're looking for cheaper on Friday. As a result, the demand of that good is lower right now. Yeah, and I think this was an excellent answer by our junior tutor. Maybe to reiterate one more time, change in the price of the commodity is a movement along the demand curve, either up or down, whereas these other changes, prices of related goods, change in income of the consumer, change in taste and preferences of the consumer, or change in expectation, result in the demand curve shifting either right or left. Cool. Move on to question 6. This is the second last question. And question 6 reads, label each of the following statements true, false, or uncertain, and explain briefly. So 1, the nominal interest rate is measured in terms of goods. The real interest rate is measured in terms of money. That's false. We did kind of go through this earlier. The real interest rate is approximately equal to the nominal interest rate minus expected inflation. Our junior tutor has also said that it is false. And they've written that the nominal interest rate is the interest rate before taking inflation into consideration. The nominal interest rate is basically the stated or face value of the interest rate. For example, The person borrows $100 at a 5% interest rate. Will pay $5 as interest without taking inflation into account. Where the interest rate is a real interest rate, it is arrived at after deducting the inflation rate from the nominal interest rate. This reflects how much will the borrower pay or a lender actually earn. It is the nominal interest rate, which is measured in terms of money, and real interest rate is measured in terms of goods, as it reflects the purchasing power of the economy. 2, as long as expected inflation remains roughly constant, the movements in the real interest rate are roughly equal to the movements in the nominal interest rate. Our junior tutor said that is true. So they've written that movement in the real interest rate will be equal to the movement in the nominal interest rate when expected inflation will be constant, because real interest rate equals nominal interest rate minus expected inflation. So basically what this is saying is that our expected inflation is equal to 0. When that happens, we have that the real interest rate is roughly equal to the nominal interest rate. Again, our junior tutor here said it's equal. That's not correct, so I don't want you guys to get mixed marks on a test or something. It is roughly equal. And you can look into the work of Fisher if you want to read up on that more. But this question phrases it accordingly. It said remains roughly constant, and the movements are roughly equal. Question 3, when expected inflation increases, the real rate of interest falls. Junior tutor said this is true. Real interest rate falls when expected inflation increases, because real interest rate is arrived at by subtracting expected inflation from nominal interest rate. Therefore, unless the nominal interest rate increases at the same time, rate is inflation, real interest rate falls. Maybe I read that sentence poorly, maybe it just lost me. Regardless, I'll just run you through an example quick. So 2 scenarios, real interest rate, we'll say that in this case, I equals 8%. So here we've got 8, and scenario 1, expected inflation is 0. Scenario 2, expected inflation is 5%. So if expected inflation increases, all else being equal, we can see that the real interest rate is then going to fall. In the scenario where the expected inflation rate is 0%, the real inflation rate is 8%. Scenario where the expected inflation rate is 5%, the real interest rate is 3%. And I just made the mistake that I've been harping on our junior tutor for making. I wrote equals when it should say roughly equals. 4, the nominal policy interest rate is set by the central bank. True. Nominal policy interest rate is set by the central bank, which forms the basis of interest rates charged by banks lending to the public. So if you, I don't know if you guys keep up with financial news at all, the central bank has set the interest rates very low right now as a means to encourage people to spend. As a result, you can get a mortgage at a very low rate right now because the central bank has set this baseline rate, also called the overnight rate, to a low number, and it forms the basis of interest rates charged by banks lending to the public. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should add to that. 8 times a year, the Bank of Canada will revise this overnight interest rate. So basically every month and a half. Move on now to the last question. Are fixed costs or variable costs considered sunk costs in the short run? So our junior tutor has said that fixed costs and variable costs, sunk costs in the short run. Fixed costs, these are the expenditures which do not vary with the quantity of output produced in business. Fixed costs do not change regardless of the level of production, at least not in the short term. So for example, if you've got a store and let me try that again. You operate at your normal 9 to 5 hours all week. So the store opens at 9 a.m., closes at 5 p.m. And you hire some employees to man the store. We'll call it a hardware store. So you hire a cashier and maybe some people to work the aisles. And nobody comes into your store all week and you don't sell a thing. You still have fixed costs to pay. You had to pay your employees for coming into work. You had to pay the electricity to keep the lights on in the place. You had to pay the hydro to keep the water running, etc., things of this nature. So these are fixed costs. And whether you're producing a lot or a little, or selling a lot or a little, these costs remain the same because you still have to pay the employees, you still have to have the lights on. Fixed costs do not change with output, and so firms have to pay for them even if they shut down. Fixed costs cannot be changed. It would have been the same as it had been. Variable costs, on the other hand, variable costs depend on the company's production. Max production are therefore those costs which vary according to the quantity of output produced. The more firm it produces, the higher the variable cost would be. When output is 0, variable cost is 0. If there's a production increase, then the variable cost will rise. So an example might be if you pay your employees commission, they don't sell, if their entire salary is commission, they don't sell anything, you don't have to pay them any money. But if they sell a lot of product, then your costs are going to rise as the output rises. Fixed costs are sunk. These are those costs which are already incurred and cannot be recovered because they were existing in past, so cannot be altered. And it will play no part in the future production or pricing of future economic decisions. Fixed cost of sunk cost is a minimum necessary for the production of any output at all. If some fixed costs are recoverable, these costs can be avoided and are therefore not reduced. Sunk costs must have occurred and cannot be changed or avoided in the future. So, an example of sunk costs, if you don't know, is say you buy some tickets to a Raptors game, and on the way to the game, I don't know, traffic is so bad that you're not even going to get into Toronto in time to actually make it to the game. It's too late to sell the tickets, so this is a sunk cost. There's no way you can recover the money. You just have to take it to the chin. Relating to fixed costs, this is the same thing where if you open up your store in the morning and not a soul comes in, you still are stuck paying to keep the store open, and there's nothing you can do to recover those costs. Those costs are already sunk, they're gone, they're non-recoverable. That's the gist of the question. I'm just going to read what our junior tutor said here, the last little bit. Short run includes both fixed costs and variable costs. It's the cost of the short-term implications for the production process. This is the short output range, as it can be made once. It cannot be used over and over. In the short term, one factor of production is fixed, while the other remains variable. As we have mentioned above, that short run includes both fixed cost and variable cost. So in this perspective, firm's total cost can be divided into fixed cost, which a firm must incur before producing any output, variable cost, which is incurred in the act of proceeding. The cost of producing a firm's output depends on the labor and physical capital used by the firm. When a company looks at its total cost of production in the short term, it would be divided into two categories of fixed, unable to change, and variable, can be changed. Maybe last thing I will just add, since we are speaking of fixed costs and variable costs, is that profits in the economic sense equal to total revenue times total cost. Total revenue is made up of price times quantity. There's total costs in the economic sense are made up of fixed costs, like we've talked about here, minus variable costs, which we've talked about here, minus opportunity costs, whereas in the accounting sense of profits, which I will denote pi A, is again going to be total revenue minus total costs. Total revenue looks the same, PQ, but total costs are just made up of fixed costs and variable costs because opportunity costs are not included in the accounting sense of profits. So opportunity costs equals 0. Then we can say that economic profits are equal to accounting profits. Give you guys a second to take a picture of that. So that is all our questions today. Thank you for watching. If you wanted to ask your own questions, there should be a link below the video, I believe. You can just follow it. It'll bring you to the OneClass website. You can ask any economics questions that you would like either me or our other senior tutor, Ose, to go over and answer. You can like and share the video with your friends if you're so inclined. Thank you for watching. This has been Kevin from OneClass. I hope everybody has a nice night. Cheers.